order. We're quite live yet. Oh, we're not live yet, okay. This one's excluded too, maybe that's. Yourself on recording. You want to ask a question? Right? Okay. So it's 4:32. I will call this meeting to the Planning Commission to order. Today is February 27th. I have no idea how that happened. Crazy end of February. We will begin with citizens to be heard. Is everyone here to apply, or is there anyone here who want to make a comment? No one online. Okay. Seeing no citizens to be heard, is there any ex parte communications or disclosures that anyone needs to make? Okay. We are doing interviews afterwards. Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. So we will move on to approval of meeting minutes. I know everyone's answering their questions right now, but let's take a pause. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes in the packet? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt.
I did have one, and it's, let's see if I can do this right. It's amazing. It's down when we had the public hearing opened at 4:44. Down a little bit later, it says, Commissioner Barkley moved to send a favorable / unfavorable.
Yeah.
So it should probably have the unfavorable out of there.
Yeah, it's a favorable recommendation.
Nice catch.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes with the amended correction.
I'll move to adopt the minutes of the February 13th regular planning commission meeting as amended by Obi.
And then I'll second it.
All right. Did you have another comment too, or just,
I was gonna try to beat him, but
Oh.
there's no
Racing all
foul.
day.
okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, they are adopted. I knew McKenna wasn't gonna be here. Were we expecting?
Steve is also not going to be here.
Oh, there's only 6 of us. Perfect. All right, county commission liaison report.
You know, I don't really have
You got
much. It
nothing.
was pretty mellow.
It was a longer
It
meeting.
was a longer meeting, but nothing that really pertained to planning.
Yeah, we had the hearing
Fine.
for the VA, or not VA, Manderfield, so it's HGHO, which is still open, so
Yeah.
it'll be decided, voted on at the March 21st meeting.
Right.
Yeah,
I did want to raise, because the planning commission was involved in the transportation master plan. I know there were a number of people who were surprised to see that grant come up, especially since reviewing the master plan, the grant was listed, or the project that the
Right.
grant was being
Yeah.
for was very, very low priority,
Right.
especially in citizen comments, but I also know grant monies are hard to come by.
Mhm.
Rather than going into the details of that, I was wondering, for the members of the public who want to know things that are coming up in the future that might be on a agenda, do you know how to get that information out before it kind of hits the packet?
Oh, before it hits the packet.
Yeah, like, you know, how could people anticipate that they could maybe make a comment ahead of time, or especially for things that are administrative
Or maybe if there's like a grant
Mhm.
being applied for, there could be like a little status of what grants the
Right.
county's pursuing or something, but
Hmm,
I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
wonder.
I don't know that question. I would have to ask that question. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I mean, it's tough because we do the long range planning in order to hopefully reduce, you know, confusion at the
Sure.
time of, but obviously. That is a huge document
Right.
and many people
Right.
can attend all the townhomes, so.
Right,
Something to,
right.
something to maybe think about.
Yeah.
the Body. Right. Cool, any other questions or thoughts for Fish? The general session ends, what, next 2 weeks from now? Is it next week? The first week? That's right, March 1st is. Right.
It's like lava falls, you're just always above. the
You're
last
always
one.
above lava falls. You're always above the end of the demo session. Oh, that's funny. All right, well, we will move on then to our interviews. And since we have some commissioners still wrapping up their questions, I'll go ahead and explain how this process works. So we do have a consistent process that's in our bylaws. Every single commissioner asks the same question of each of the applicants. Because we have so many applicants today, I'll go ahead and just read the same questions, and that way, in the same order, no one gets tripped up. You'll have a chance to answer all the questions. We try to keep answers to, 3 minutes at most. We generally don't ask follow-up questions unless there's something that we just specifically need clarification on. Maybe we didn't understand what you said or something like that. After everyone has been interviewed and had a chance to answer all questions, then the commission will vote on a recommendation. So the county commission is the body that ultimately makes the appointment. They consider our recommendation. They do have the discretion to not take our recommendation, or even to ask us to go back to review. That rarely happens, but it has happened. So if your name is not the name that comes up in the recommendation, don't be discouraged. But also, we appreciate the fact that we hopefully always have more qualified people, amazing people applying for our open roles. And there are many opportunities to get involved, and we just appreciate this civic involvement, and being here in the first place is really cool. So thank you. Okay, commissioners, do you have your questions you want to pass up to me? And then what I will do is, we're just going to do the interviews in the order. I don't think we have the people listed in our packet. Just in the agenda. Summary.
Go to
Here it is in the agenda summary. There we go. So Nick, Carolyn, Dylan, Lexi, and Jerry is the order that we'll go in. That's just the order in the packet. Do I have everyone's questions? All right, Nick, come on up. If you could just say your full name, and what we'll do is give you a chance to sit everyone, introduce yourself, and then I'll go through these questions.
Perfect. And I have 3 minutes for that, correct?
3 minutes,
Intro.
yes, absolutely, go for it.
My name is Nick Oldham. Thank you for having me here. I moved here seasonally 15 years ago while I was going to school at USU. I graduated in recreation resource management in 2009, as the country was coming out of the 2008-2009 economic crisis. As we were considering where to apply for jobs, my wife and I were drawn back to Moab and decided to stay here because Moab seemed to have the greatest opportunity. And not only was the economy promising here, but it also seemed like a place where mom and pop businesses flourished. I believed that we could have a future here. My career is in tourism. I've grown with a small business here over the years. We built a commercial building in Moab in which we strove to embody the design characteristics that we viewed embodied Moab. We also went through the challenges of building employee housing, and I was integral to both of those large projects. My wife and I started a family here, and I designed our first house here with sustainable design as a priority. We have built my wife's small farm business here, and we really do enjoy living here. Through the years, so many of my friends from diverse backgrounds have moved away, people who could have been amazing assets to our community. They could not see a future here as they hit the step of life where they desired to own a home or just live without roommates. Looking at Grand County, limited space and a strange sense of community has resulted in haphazard development. Our community will continue to change and grow. I believe that we should look at that with warmth and guidance, not with fear. I am eager to look forward to the future land use project and to provide a fresh perspective to land use decisions. I am skilled at seeing all sides productively and empathetically, and I'm able to work and communicate with people from a variety of backgrounds. Clearly, there are candidates who have been to more of these meetings. However, please consider my application. I am a quick learner. I enjoy understanding complex systems, and I'm motivated in life by problem solving and simmering solutions to their simplest form. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Before I go into the questions, I do think, Aaron, is this you?
Yes, sorry,
Could you
that's
pick
too
one
many.
of these? Oh, sorry.
He thought he was gonna do the 5 questions.
So go ahead and pick which one you want to ask. and then
Right,
set up
right.
and I'll-
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read these questions as written, so give you a chance to answer each, and then we'll move on to the next question. Please describe how your experience would lend itself to the efficient and effective administration of planning and zoning business in Grant County. And I'm happy to repeat it. I'll
So-
repeat it again.
Yes, please.
Please describe how your experience would lend itself to efficient and effective administration of planning and zoning business in Grant County.
Thank you. So in my experience, especially in my day-to-day profession, it's a fast-paced environment. And so we always try to be correct, but more than that, be learning. In land use development or land use code, predictability is one of the things that I see as a hurdle for our community for one reason or another. And so with that in mind, I would choose predictability as one of the things that could really, really aid streamlining our processes here.
What is your vision for our county as it regards planning?
So adventurous in spirit. So my hope for our county would be, a cohesive place to live. There's so many different adventures that we're all on. And time and place for those things but is important, but more than that, in order to grow and reach the future, we also need to look at our past. And if embrace it's the wrong word, help it, guide it, grow it. Moab is still, and Grand County is still one of the few gateway towns to national parks where I can't find a sign in town telling me where Arches is. And yes, we get that question in our office. And so that saddens me that we can't claim our national parks.
This one's a long one. So.
Is this
let me
Aaron?
know. No, it's not
I'm
Aaron.
totally joking.
Aaron's,
Mark,
so, I think this is OB's. So obviously people have property rights that determine what they can do on the property that they own. But the community often makes some regulations that affect what people can do on their property. Do you have thoughts about drawing this balance?
I do, and from time to time, I've had really strong feelings about it one way or another. Yes, property rights are really important, and especially if you invested. And I think that's where some of our sticky situations have come into play in the county in the last, 5 years. And having land use rights as a reason for investment in a property, having those change out from underneath you, I can see as being devastating. When we built our first home here, there were a few avenues that we pursued and ended up designing and building our own custom home because some of the other organizations we were working with didn't view our home as our investment. It's the largest investment we've ever made. So tripling that investment from people who relied on it or counted on it, I think be a really heavy decision to make and should be viewed that way. Is that ambiguous?
Question was designed just to get people to talk about those issues, so that's
Right.
good, thank you.
Do you mind if I reframe this as,
Yes.
what is your understanding of the
Yes.
land use code?
I was just thinking, I'm like, oh, I don't like yes or no
I
questions.
got your back.
Okay.
What is your understanding of the land use code?
My understanding of the land use code is that it's a roadmap. We can find different ways to get there, and we can take different turns along the way. But our land use code is our guiding principles to growth in the valley. I view that through that code, putting high density next to high thoroughfares and creating opportunities for single family homes in more quaint places is an ideal design structure. I do think that limited commercial space has pushed commercial use into all sorts of different places in our lives. Same with not looking far enough down the road with multifamily and the lack of apartments. They're going to go in one of our backyards. And so it's a roadmap that we can use deep into the future to, create a sense of place. And once again, as I look at a property, I can look at that land use code and see what possible futures are going to pop up around.
And why do you want to be on the planning commission?
Want's a strong word. I view this as something that I care about. I really have seen friends move away, and no, they weren't from the same backgrounds or philosophies as me. And so this is something that I think needs done well. And by well, that's not pointed or meant to be taken pointedly. Our community is heavily diverse. I think that having voices from a lot of different backgrounds will help prevent some of the real contentious issues that we've had. And so even if it's just popping in a word of warning or how something can be perceived from a different background, I think that's wildly important.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us this evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm gonna move over there because I feel like I'm in the spot.
Carolyn, you got next? Right, so if you wouldn't mind stating your full name, and then we'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and then we'll go through our questions again.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Carolyn Conant. I'm from Connecticut originally and went to college in New York and then moved out to Utah right after that for my first job out of college and first job in Moab, which was at the Outward Bound School that has since moved down to Spanish Valley. I'm really passionate about kind of a holistic look at sustainable communities. So sustainable from not only an environmental perspective or a thriving social fabric and social community perspective, but also economic perspective. In my free time, I love to rock climb and mountain bike and trail run and just generally be in the beautiful place that we're lucky enough to call home.
All right, fantastic. Please describe how your experience would lend itself to the efficient and effective administration of planning and zoning business in Grand County.
Sure. So I currently work and have worked for about the last year at a nationwide nonprofit focused on advancing energy efficiency and affordable housing. We work with local governments to help them plan comprehensive energy efficiency upgrade programs for their affordable housing and implement them, and also to coordinate with other relevant health and safety and affordable housing and energy stakeholders in their communities. And this crosses scales from local government to county government to state government as well. So I have experience from my current position kind of navigating the different policy and regulatory realms involved in effective planning for healthy communities. And prior to this previous experience, I also worked for 3 years for a local government in Colorado, the city of Fort Collins, for 2 years, managing a residential energy efficiency program. So fairly similar to work I'm doing now, but more of a program management level. And before that on community-wide sustainability efforts. So that touched not only reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment, but also improving access to public transit, reducing waste, improving the air quality of the community, and also social and economic health activities like promoting the health of our local small business community, and increasing access to affordable housing as well. So I think from those 2 roles, I've had a lot of exposure to policymaking and navigating intersector relationships in policymaking and kind of the political sphere. And know that sometimes things do move very fast, as Nick said, but sometimes they also move very slowly. And it's really important to get the right relationships in place to be effective in planning work.
Great. What is your vision for our county in regards to planning?
Yeah, I have a vision for our county regarding planning that the future will be shaped by the people who live here. I'm thinking back to the community-wide workshops that were hosted last year, the kind of visioning workshops. I can't remember exactly what they were called, but there were the 4 quadrants of scenarios that everyone came up with out of the couple of days. And there was one that was kind of the shining beacon of hope for people who are participating, I think, that really focused on that kind of community-led vision for itself. So, emerging out from external forces to have decision-making power over the kind of future that the people of Moab and Grand County actually want to see for our county. So I think primarily just that future is shaped by the people who actually live here. But in my mind, that encompasses, as I said before, healthy economy and people, but not at the expense of the environment. And also the ability to adapt and thrive in the face of change while simultaneously preserving the elements of our community fabric that make it so special and make it what it is.
Great. All right, here's our long one. Great questions. Obviously, people have property rights that define what they can do with the property they own. But the community sometimes makes regulations that affect what people can do on their property. And do you have any thoughts about this balance?
Yeah, and I have the advantage of having heard it once before too, so thanks for taking one for the team. I've had a spectrum of feelings on the matter as well, and became a homeowner here about 5 years ago, so that's definitely changed how I've felt about planning and kind of regulation by government and how it affects my private property rights or those of my neighbors. And I think like anything else, there's a fine balance to be struck. What I think is so special about Moab is that everybody kind of has a universal value for freedom and liberty and right to self-expression. And that's really important in these kinds of conversations. But I think what's so interesting about our community is that people, that doesn't come at the expense of willingness to engage in the public process and wanting your voice to be heard in kind of that regulatory space. So I think when I imagine what a fine balance looks like there, it really is just that having that really active involvement from people who are affected by the regulations to try to make sure that any regulations are doing the best they can for the most people, and that people at the very least, as kind of a minimum bar, feel that their voices were heard in the shaping of regulations and that they had the ability to affect outcomes, and that can go a long way to mitigate the tensions that emerge when regulations are imposing on personal liberties.
What is your understanding of the land use code?
Yeah, agree that it's a roadmap for how we plan for the future of our community, particularly in the built environment. I think it's also work that happens in tandem with other planning documents at the county and city level, transportation master plan and the city sustainability plan. And that obviously there's a lot of regulations and laws that are set out by the land use code, but it's not intended necessarily to be a very rigid document, and is something that can be responsive to the emerging needs of our community through other types of policy recommendations, if not a complete overhaul of the land use code on a very regular basis.
And why do you want to be on the planning commission?
I love this community and I want to contribute to its well-being and give back how I can. I've also seen friends move away and seen the community lose people who could be real contributors to its well-being and future. So I don't want my friends to move away, and I want to be able to start my family here and help shape it into the community that I want for myself and for my family into the future. And I really believe in kind of civic responsibility and engagement and public participation. And I'm just excited to find different opportunities to try to participate.
All right. Thank you so much for meeting with us tonight.
Thank you.
Dylan. Great. So if you want to take a moment and introduce yourself, and then I'll ask
Yeah.
some questions.
I'm Dylan Beck, lived in Moab my whole life. I went to Grand County High School, graduated, went to college at USU, got an associate's degree in applied science, IT system support, web development, and all that stuff. Let's see, my family owns a local business here, so I'm pretty much to a lot of people there. With Woody's Tavern, I'm the door guy and the security guy and the karaoke guy, so I do a little public relations. So I get a lot of, I get to hear mix with the crowd. Like I know everybody pretty much.
But she's not Woody.
She's the hunter safety chief. So yeah, and then when I was at USU, I was the vice president of the student body for the entire southwestern or southeastern school area, whatever you call it, and for 2 years in a row. So I've been sat on the board with that, so I have experience with how all this stuff works. So I just thought I'd want to just give back to the community, start getting back into it because I care. So
Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you our questions. Please describe how your experience would lend itself to the efficient and effective administration of planning and zoning business in Grand County.
like I said, I lived here my whole life, and I listen to the people. I get to listen to a lot of, when they come and tell me their stories and whatever, or whatever. And I think that I like represent right. I could, give a root sort of a thing for Moab, because my family was here for 7 generations. I mean, I lived before, and I feel like there's a lot of people that doesn't always agree with all this stuff that's happening, but then there's some, there's got to be a fine line there where we can all work, figure it out with the locals and the old, there's a division sort of there sometimes, and I feel like I can be a good bridge between those, two sort of groups.
And what is your vision for our county as regards planning?
My vision, well, I remember when we had that workshop too at the college that one time, and I thought, I kind of freaked out at first because I was like, is this what's going to really happen? And they said it was kind of like a guidelines, and then all of a sudden it's kind of happening like that. So what I see is Moab is it's going to keep growing, and it's going to keep on being better and better, but we have to accept that, adapt to it, and figure out how to work together with it. I'm saying, because we all live here and we all have, things that affect everything. So yeah, it's going to be I think it's going to be a great place in the future too. I mean, I was part of the reason, I was the poster boy for the USU college campus, when I came here. So, I mean, I was all for that, so I think that's a great thing. I don't know, I love Moab, what can I say?
So obviously, people have property rights about what they can do with the property they own, but the community often makes some regulations that affect what people can do on their property. What are your thoughts about this balance?
I've been on both, I've been on that. I say I understand that because I'm a property owner, and plus, like I said, my parents own, what do you say? And so sometimes you have to take one for the team too, though, you know, either for the community, you know, if you don't like what's up, you have to sort of work with it and, you know, try to make the best of for everybody, you know. For example, like the Creek Park project right there in Mill Creek, you know, I kind of thought that it was needed to be repaired one time, you know, and it was kind of not done right in the first place and the way they went through with it and stuff. And, you know, I brought that to everybody's attention, kind of went to that a long time ago. So there again, it was like something that we're kind of taking on because we don't, you know, sorry, I'm nervous. And my words don't come sometimes, but yeah, you know, it's like, and then again, being a property owner, so because I got at my house, you know, I have a lot of stuff that I acquired for my life because it's my stuff, you know, but then people come across the street, move in, they're fresh in town, new people, and they don't like the way my stuff looks, you know, but it's like, you know, you gotta figure it out between the two to get along, you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
What's your understanding of the land use code?
it's like they said, it's kind of like a guideline or a, you know, a map sort of, but I think it should be able to be, you know, where it can adapt to it for everybody to, you know, to work good for everybody. Let's just leave it at that.
And then why do you want to be on the planning commission?
Because like I just want to be involved. I want to help Moab again. I'd run for mayor, but they won't let me. So.
All right, well, thank you so much for meeting with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, Lexi. Okay, by now, you saw the drill, so go ahead and
Yeah.
grab the seats.
I actually printed out some resumes for you guys if you want to know. Okay, yeah, so my name's Lexi Walker. So I actually have some relatives here in town, my mom's sister, so I just grew up coming to Moab, like ever since I was a little girl, we would always come every summer and play on the river, and so when I turned 18, I became a river guide with our family friends who owned a rafting company, and so that's what I did for my summer job while I went to college. So I earned just barely enough money to pay for my tuition. I go up and spend it all on tuition and then come back down to river guide again. So then I came back, and then after I graduated, I met a local, and so we got married, and now I'm a teacher here, and I've been a teacher for 9 going on 10 years. And we have a 2-year-old daughter, and then we just had a baby boy. So Moab is, yeah, our home. Thank you.
Wonderful. So please describe how your experience, sorry, did you want to add something?
No.
Oh, I heard.
No.
No,
Sorry.
you're staying distracted. Please describe how your experience would lend itself to the efficient and effective administration of planning and zoning business here in Green County.
Yeah, so I'm a teacher. I obviously don't have a background in planning and zoning, but my husband is a born and raised local. His family's from here, their family's from here. So they have owned a construction company, and so my husband knows how to build. So we've built 2 custom homes here in Moab, and our home is currently for sale, and we have property we own that we want to build a 3rd one and hopefully be done with that. And so I've just seen from the construction point of view and having to come to planning and zoning and purchasing lots and figuring out how that whole process works. And so I feel like just with that experience, I think I could be a little bit of value to the committee.
And what is your vision for our county as it regards planning?
Yeah, I think the vision, kind of like what everyone said, it's like a map or a guideline to have and see like what's going to be best for this community. I think what's best and what's safest is there's planning and zoning for a reason. You can't just let anyone do whatever they want, wherever they want. And what's going to be safe for like fire and to meet all those codes. I think that's what people need to take into consideration. It's just not going to be a free for all.
Great. So obviously people have property rights about what they can do with the property they own. And also the community sometimes makes regulations that affect what people can do on their property. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's, it could be like an emotional conversation and topic for people who own property, and then to have it changed from them. I know when my husband and I are searching for property to build our next custom home, we'll see like a really great piece of land and we're like, oh, this is over an acre. This is great. We can subdivide it and sell half of it. And then we come to planning and zoning and it's, no, you can't. And so we've kind of ran into that. And then it's like, but how come this lot over here can have half acre and build 4 homes on it? So I think that's where the community has a lot of questions and not concerns, but just interest in it. And I'm also interested in that, why things are zoned a certain way and what's the reason behind it. And so I would love to learn more about it and contribute to that.
Great. What's your understanding of the land use code?
My understanding, I think I kind of answered it a little bit.
Oh, so I
Yeah,
think I
you
switched the land use code. So we'll just invert them.
Like,
So
did I-
what's your vision for our county with regards to planning?
Yeah, my vision kind of goes off of that same question too, is what's gonna be safe? What's gonna help our community grow? What's going to help the people who have been here long term, like you guys, but what's also gonna help our community is a tourist town. It is gonna bring in visitors and rentals and things like that. So what's gonna make everyone happy and cohesive and help our community thrive?
And why do you want to be on the planning commission?
I would love to be on the planning commission because, I just love this town. I sometimes, like, I have to be honest, sometimes I complain about it. Like, I just want to go to Target or Chick-fil-A and I can't have any of those here. And so I would go back home during summers or during like my weeks off of college and stuff. And then every time I go back home to Washington, I would just be like, I want to be in Moab so bad. I just want to go back there. So I really, really do love this town and I'm passionate about construction and building, even though I'm a teacher. And my husband and I actually just went to the Parade of Homes in St. George this last weekend and I love it. And we were just driving around, we're like, look at all this land. There's so much building down there. And when you come back to Moab, it's like, there's not a lot to build here. We're very landlocked with the rims and the canyon and the rules with zoning and everything. And so I just think it's so valuable here. It's so important. And I think there's a way to make everyone happy and make sure that people are feeling valued, understood, and doing what they're wanting to do with their property.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
It's funny when I tell people I live in a county of 10,000, they don't balk, and then I say I live 2 hours from a Target and I get like, oh my
Yeah.
God. All right, Jerry. Hey. Let us get to know you a little bit and then we'll ask you the same questions.
Alrighty, I feel like I've got a little bit of an advantage here because I've heard all of the questions already. Anyway, my experience is a little bit unique and I hope that comes out in the interview process. I'm Jerry Clays. My wife Deb is over there. My daughter Allison lives here in town, not with us, but in town. We have a son in Alaska, and he'll probably be there until the day he retires, I'm guessing. I was actually born and raised in the Detroit area, went to Michigan Tech, have a mechanical engineering degree, worked in that field for now 43 years. That went by quick. And most of that time was in a pretty unique role. I've had an ability to both do the technical role and unlike most engineers, actually do pretty well on the customer facing side too. So it's kind of a unique ability and I think that would help me here quite a bit. I've managed groups as big as 600 and as small as a dozen or so. So, pretty varied background, been in some pretty tense situations over the decades, but managed to live through them all. So, yeah, that's in a nutshell my background. Oh, also spent most of my adult career in either Colorado or Utah, lived in Grand County here since 2014 and lived in the Salt Lake area for about 5 years as well.
All right. So please describe how your experience would lend itself to the efficient and effective administration of planning and zoning business in Grand County.
Okay, well, from an experience standpoint, I think thinking the mechanical engineering field in general lends itself to the planning side. You have to deal a lot with technical issues, and I don't have any issue with those whatsoever. from the administration side, my experience, geez, I did VP roles for about 20 years, which is almost 100% administration. So I'd say I'm well experienced in the administration side as well. And a lot of that time was spent in, generally in escalated situations is where my expertise has been used. It seems the higher you go on the management side, the more you spend dealing with the issues that don't get resolved alone.
Great. And what is your vision for our county with regards to planning?
Well, that's a tough one. Usually when you think about vision anyway, I think 10 years out or more. And I guess this particular role is a 4-year role, right? So if I could limit my vision to the next 4 years, or maybe probably even beyond that, I would say there's one overarching concern in this county, and that is the lack of affordable housing. And I don't, when you say affordable, I think, a lot of people think about low income housing, and we're not even at that realm here. People can't even afford middle of the road housing. So, I do think that there are things that could be done to be able to achieve that so that people could afford even entry level homes. But I think, those things lead into probably the next questions that you have on the list. But really, I think that's the main thing that needs addressed. I think there's some good work going on. Some of the topics you're going to talk about today, like what are some of the things that are getting in the way of being able to build more affordable houses. I think the work that was done in Thompson Springs was really good work. Seeing how the replat there is going through the process, it looks like change management there, I gotta say, it's been handled very well. So anyway, did that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously people do have property rights about what they can do with property they own, but the community also makes some regulations that affect what people can do in their property. What are your thoughts on this balance?
Yeah. So generally, when someone buys a piece of property, they understand what they can do with the property at the time they bought it. And in general, people believe it's going to be that way forever. And of course, nothing is forever. So I guess the fortunate ones take advantage of the codes that are in place at the time they buy it. The problem comes when things change, and managing that change process becomes the difficult thing. I guess how that change process is managed in the case of this commission looks like, at least like in Thompson Springs, it was done well, lots of communication. I guess if you go back to the vision, which is how do we get affordable housing in Graham County, something has to change. So, the change process just needs to be managed well, be well communicated, and people need to understand what's in it for them. I think if they can if the change is managed in a way that, people win in the process, or at least believe they've won in some way, then it's managed well and it goes through. Yeah, that's a difficult thing, change management.
Describe your understanding of the land use code.
So I have a question about that question. That's Aaron. All right. So do you mean how well do I understand it, or do you mean do I understand the purpose of it?
I would like to see how well people understand it, because
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what we got to work with here, right?
Yeah.
The owners, the council, everything.
I
For the
mean-
commission. Yeah, so I would say I understand it well. I've dug through some various parts of it. I've built 2 homes here, and actually you helped on one of them. Yeah, and I have no problem going into the code, looking up the codes online and reading them and understanding. I wouldn't say I know all of them, but I don't know that anybody does. But yeah, the ones that were applicable at the times that I had to understand them, I certainly understood. Right now I'm digging through. I'm still working. I've got some good years left in me yet, but just to give you a feel for the complexity of codes that I've dealt with in the past, I'm digging through EPA codes and EPA methods right now. And I would say they're far more complex than the codes we have here. You know,
That's a good sign.
Just a little.
just a little.
Just a little.
Fortunately, you know, for the people that live here, I think they're written in a way that's fairly understandable, and they should be, right? If you're the one that owns the land, you should understand what the codes mean.
And why do you want to be on the planning commission?
Well, mainly because I guess my family life is at a point now where the kids are grown, they're moved out of the house. My work life is at a point now where that's settled down a little bit. I work out of the home. To be quite honest, 3 or 4 years ago, I was on the road about 3 weeks out of 4. There's no way I could have committed to this 10 years ago, even longer. I would say for a period of about 20 years in the middle of my career, my job responsibilities were such that I just couldn't take the time, but I'm at a point now where I can, and so I'd like to give back.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, that is all of our applicants. Since we had 2 withdraw their names. So just for those of you who haven't been in this process before, I'll give you a sense of kind of what happens next. We do need to make one recommendation this evening. I actually think this is probably the hardest thing a member of a board has to do. I've seen many boards struggle with this, especially to have so many qualified people who took the time to apply. It's always a difficult decision. But we will need to make a motion. So we'll have somebody make a motion, and every motion needs to be seconded before we consider it. So if a motion doesn't get a second, it fails. After a motion has been made, somebody can offer an alternative motion, which also requires a second. If an alternative motion gets a second, we'll vote on that person. If they fail to get a second, or if that vote fails, then we'll go back to our original motion or entertain another alternate motion. There are only 4 of us today, and that is a quorum, so we do need to have a unanimous decision to send a recommendation forward. I've seen boards fail to make a recommendation that gets unanimous counts in this type of situation, in which case we would send this forward to the commission and let the commission decide. So
That's nice.
So let's do our friend Trish a favor.
Yeah.
And you're all welcome to stay. There's no requirement that you do, but we'll go into board business now. So, generally speaking, we heard from many different qualified candidates. I think we have an array of experiences, all have many important merits. If there's any kind of open table discussion about gaps in our body or things like that, this would be a good time for it. But if we want to talk about an individual one, we'll want to get a motion on the table.
You want discussion first and then, or motion first?
If we're going to talk about whether we think somebody is the right fit for what reasons, I think we should probably have a motion on the table. That's what we do, a substantive discussion. But I do think that there are many strengths represented by the applicants that represent different gaps, blind spots, and so on this board. And we're not going to be able to fill them all at once, but we can certainly discuss those before having a motion on the table.
I'll just keep the meeting going. I move to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission to appoint Jerry Clace, my apologies, Jerry Clace to serve on the planning commission.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second that one.
Okay. Is there an alternative motion before we start discussion? Okay, I think you want to,
I would like to discuss
let's let Tony finish
Okay,
talk,
sorry.
because generally the person who makes the motion goes, and then we'll go to you, Aaron, and then we'll continue.
Yeah, I want everyone who has applied here to know that I knew that this was going to be very difficult from the moment we started seeing applicant qualifications come in. I know a few people on this list who have applied, and I knew their experience. I did not know Jerry Clace, but in listening to interviews, I spend most of my time in my professional and personal life just making an elevator pitch, moving very fast. And I just sat here and wrote down one-liners that I thought were pertinent to the discussions that we continue to have in this body. And the combination of Jerry's experience and the specific things that he pointed out. Namely, the fact that people in this community can't even afford middle income housing. Jerry said that explicitly, and that is also the reason that I'm here, because people cannot afford middle income housing in this town. So just hearing Jerry say that explicitly was what made up my mind for me. So just to, in the sake of the spirit of discussion, let the entire body of this meeting know how I came to that conclusion. That was it. That was the 1-2 punch.
You have a comment?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, I came into this body not knowing the land use code. That was like, I was an idiot, and I feel like that was like, wow, like, it's important to have people that kind of know, like, that kind of thing. I think a couple of our applicants definitely did that. I also liked Carolyn's experience in other cities, and kind of like, she has some background on that. And I'd also like to say, like, I've seen Nick at several of our functions, which I always appreciate that too. Like, people that showed up before. So,
This is a tough,
yeah.
it's an enviable problem to have so many qualified people.
Yeah.
I only want to emphasize that also, the two people who pulled their names off it. One served for, I don't know, 30 years as a staff person to the planning commission. The other was on the planning commission and ended up going on to the county commission when they had a vacancy. Somebody pulled them in. And then I read down the rest of the list. It's exceptional to have such good people. So I would also say this. People don't get on the commission one time. If they apply a second time, often do. I'll use Kevin Walker as an example, who's now on the county commission. The first time he came in here, he didn't get on the planning commission. He came right back and got on the planning commission. So don't take this as discouraging. Amazing that we had at least 7 people on this list and 5 of them that remain on this list. I don't know how we make this decision. It's I am probably moved by Jerry, and I've moved by probably Carolyn for experience. And at some point, we'll probably come to some consensus so that we have a recommendation. But there we are.
So we have a motion on the table. Would either of you like to make an alternative motion? If not, I'm going to call the question and we'll move on. Okay. Well,
And we can always revote, can't we?
Mhm.
That is, we can vote and not come to a consensus, and can we come back to
well,
that
I'd rather
person
we
later?
try and have a motion on the table we think could pass. So if you're already feeling like, the motion on the table isn't something you would support, then I would recommend an alternative motion.
I will keep my mouth shut.
Okay. Aaron, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that, we'll call the question. So we have a motion by Tony, seconded. Was that seconded by Aaron or seconded? Okay, seconded by Aaron, to appoint Jerry Clays to the vacancy on the planning commission, to make a recommendation to appoint Jerry Clays to the vacancy on the planning commission. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. So I just want to say thank you as well to everybody who applied. I also was not selected the first time I applied. Kevin Walker was. One of the challenges that we have had as a body is making sure that we are communicating the many, many different facets that make up our community. And it is a blind spot we continue to have. And no matter who got this recommendation, we would continue to have that blind spot because we have such a diverse and constantly growing and expanding in diversity community. I just want to say thank you to every single one of you who spent the time applying, showing up tonight, And I hope that you'll stay involved because we as a group of volunteer citizens can only get so much accomplished. We need people who want to help us do the right thing, make sure we're getting the right information and making sure that information is shared to the community. And, it's such a critical role being involved, whether you're, at the table bloviating or you're sitting in the audience. But just thank you so much. And please stay in touch. There will be future vacancies. There will be opportunities to get involved.
So I have a question.
Yes,
The process from here is it goes to the county commission.
this goes to the county commission. It will get discussion and a vote. It won't be on the consent agenda because there was more than one applicant for the vacancy. The county commission has the ability to discuss and debate whether you would be the person who gets the vote. More times out of not, they take the recommendation of the planning commission, but they do have that discretion. And then once that vote occurs, whoever is selected would show up at our next meeting and start to contribute. So,
And I just wanted to say, I appreciate all your support. I know this isn't final yet, but really all I thought is whoever's the best fit for the council or the commission as it sits today, that's really the one that should have the position. And it could be me, it could be somebody else. And I understand it could still be that way. So thank you all very much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your support.
thank you so much. And thank you to you all. We'll go ahead and move on in our meeting.
I agree.
Thank you.
I just wanted to check it out. You guys.
There's other
So
boards.
much. Good to see you. Good to see you there.
There's definitely other boards to be on too.
Have a good night. All right. It
That's hard, right?
is hard. It's always hard. It's. Okay, so now we're going to be discussing. Elisa, you put together this amazing presentation of, it's not in the packet, it's in the digital.
In the digital.
And
I
are
really
we,
want to print out my slides, and we thought that'd be a little bit of a waste, so.
and that's all good. And are you thinking about presenting this at the next
I like
county
the colors.
commission meeting, or do we wait one more because of the general session?
Yeah, they're not,
Oh, sorry.
they are not having their meeting on the 7th. So they will have a meeting on the, their next meeting is the 21st. And I don't know, I haven't actually thought about presenting this at the county commission. But
We can talk about that.
Yeah.
How you want to move forward there.
I'm not sure if they would want to think about that, but I do need, as a future consideration, I do need to present at the commission the roadmap for 2020.
Right, that's what I was thinking
That
this.
is going to be
related to,
happening
so.
on the 21st.
Okay,
That's different than this.
that is different. From this
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
this
yeah.
one was that. Okay. Obi, can you be at that meeting on the 21st? Because I won't be here, but
Yeah, I
I
was
think it
daydreaming. I thought that was a side conversation.
it was. I
So, The
the
21st is the,
Lisa's gonna be presenting the roadmap from planning and zoning, and I just think if the commission had any questions about anything the planning commission has recommended be on that.
first of
March. Yeah,
okay.
I will be. Okay, thank you.
And I'm not 100% sure. I'll try, I may be there. I may not.
Okay,
I'm gonna be in Nevada.
so you might be there virtually.
Yeah, and that's debatable where my dad lives. Yeah. I'll try.
Great.
Great.
Well, I came out entirely wrong.
No, I will try, but that way I got you back.
All right, okay, good deal. So this is a kind of a long presentation, but I'll try to keep it short. It's just a follow-up on the feedback that we received from the public workshop on barriers to housing. We did debrief that workshop at the last meeting, and then so a lot of things kind of came up, and I was taking really good notes and wanted to kind of follow up to let the public know and y'all about kind of what we already have in place that might actually address a lot of these concerns that maybe the public commenting at that workshop maybe did not realize that we already have some of these things in place, and that maybe they were thinking of past years where we've had so many, staff turnovers and different kind of planning departments in place over the last several years. So anyway, what we do already have in place in terms of automated checklists for development applications and ensuring efficiency and ease of tracking applications. We don't have like an automated checklist per se, but we could be getting to that point when we start implementing our iWork software a little bit more. We do have in place the tip sheets that have been developed and updated over time. And so those are all on the website, and I'll just go quickly if I can to our website. This is the new refresh that the county got for the whole website. So those are our planning and zoning webpage. And if you just go to the very,
Big red button.
yeah. Easy to find.
You're gonna call, hey, here's the application. We're gonna get the
Yeah,
application.
so it should not be,
Okay.
cannot miss it.
That is good government.
Transparency.
Yes. So here's all our tip sheets for every single application that we have. And Jen has done a really good job of making them super detailed. Every little step that's on, in the process is outlined and explained. And so, this format is great for the person who can take a lot of information in, but we do feel that it's hard for some people to they look at this and they get overwhelmed. And so one of the things we're gonna work on, and we've had this on the list of to-dos for several months, but I think when John left, it kind of got put on the back burner, but we were going to eventually create, oh shoot, I lost my presentation. There we go. We're gonna create some development guides, and that'll be in a future slide, but it'll kind of take what's on the tip sheet and condense it down into a little bit more easier to follow guide. Anyway, the iWork does have a project status feature as well. I don't think we've been using it to the full extent that we can, but we're gonna start using that so that folks on the backside of iWork, when they want to go in and check on the status of their project, they don't necessarily have to call us or come in. They can just look up their permit number and find out, oh yeah, it's in DRT review still, or Jenna sent out the DRT review letter. Now we're waiting on you to get back to us on some changes. So it'll just be there for people to see really easily. And then, like I said earlier, that we've been trying to kind of migrate our processes into the iWork platform. DRT right now it's not working out very well with the platform, the way it's set up. So we've been working with the iWork support and trying to set that up, but it's like, what, 20, sometimes 24 people that have to provide feedback on an application. And so it's just, Jenna's got it figured out for now. It's not really a slow or anything kind of process. It's just rounding up all those people's comments, and that just takes a bit of time. And it is also a bit of another thing that's probably, to mention is that we are only 2 staff. There's only 2 staff, and Jenna's the main one doing all of the development application processing, but that's about to change. So
yeah, and our new staff member, as we understand, she knows iWork quite well and has trained people on iWork, so she may know amazing ways for us to implement these things that I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know. So maybe she can assist a little as well.
yeah, we want to be able to use that platform. It's there. We paid for it. It's not cheap, and so we want to see if we can get it going. But it's kind of just.
So the process of the applicant having to go around and get all the signatures, we're going to remove that step and digitize it. That's a huge step.
That's
forward.
huge.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And then I just did show you guys the new website.
Application portal cannot be missed. You don't know that.
I'll make the quick comment here. Like, as another government agency bureaucrat, the select minority of staff who are just like the software guru on this one thing are the people who keep the entire thing going.
Right.
There's one guy in the entire state who knows how to use the fire business. He retires in 3 years and we have no idea.
But the New York subway system is running on a 5.5-inch block. Well, I just wanted to point out too, on our new website, we've categorized things a little bit so it's easier to see the different topics. And so, for example, search for a property that just leads you to the parcel map and your zoning and all of that is there.
Right.
And then, when you go to another, like, one of the biggest ones that we'll probably have people go into is the commercial and residential development page. And that's where we have listed, just, our standard forms, some of the process for new applications like the alternative dwelling. And then we're just gonna keep adding to this as well. There's probably a little bit more we could put on here, but that's a good one. And then all of the topics are here on the left sidebar as well. And this used to be just a jumbled up mess of so many different things that were not related to each other and just kind of outdated and broken links. And so this has all been updated. So department bodies that we work with, they're all here. Grand Water and Sewer is linked here. Southeast Utah Health Department. These are all the agencies that, are part of the DRT. And we have some of the other entities and groups that we work with and stuff like that. So that's all there. And the current plans and maps page, that's where you're gonna find all of our big plans, like the stormwater drain master plan should be on here. Sure it is, but we'll put it on there.
It might be a drop down.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, this is where we're kind of throwing all of the plans and we have the old general plan as well. And then there'll be a list here also of our, oh wait, the maps are kind of here, okay. So that link on the sidebar links to all of these maps that we also have on the county's website. Purely usability in terms of how people browse websites.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hesitate to also list the maps.
Yeah,
I think we intended to do that, probably just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah. Good idea. Okay, so that's the website and I think it's a great improvement. And we're definitely open to more feedback on that. As far as other kind of things that we can improve, we do have the subdivision workflow diagram. It's very detailed and it can also be a little overwhelming to look at. So again, we are going to create these simplified, easy to follow development guides for our most common application processes. And the one that we're going to start out with is actually something Noelle's going to be working on for the ADU housing fair workshop that will have a full list of from, applying through us and the building department and all the fees that might be associated with that. And so that'll be really great. We thought about, we took some feedback from a planning commission member about maybe putting up on our webpage, make an appointment button. And we talked about that internally. I think it would probably be a good idea because we just have a lot of walk-ins all the time. And with our new planner coming on, it could be not as much of an issue, but it is definitely a big time disruptor, I guess.
Yeah.
So having that scheduled set aside time would be better for walk-ins. And then I wanted to get some feedback on this last one, to provide developers opportunity to request a retrospective of their process. And I didn't know if this was like something, I couldn't really understand exactly what this is getting at. So retrospective is something in like project management that we would do after some project concludes to say, where did we see delays? Where did we see unexpected costs? Not to litigate that particular project, but to improve going forward. So every single use of the system makes the system stronger. That's the idea. And I think a feedback form is great, so long as there's some process to make sure you're asking the right questions and then apply it. So like an example of a good question might be, what were the steps in the process that took longer than you expected? Right, like it helps you understand what expectations people might have that you're blind to. And where those expectations weren't met. A bad question might be, was this a good experience? Because you're gonna hear that it wasn't, and there's nothing you can do with that information.
Yeah.
So, you know,
constructive
cost,
feedback,
time,
constructive, yeah.
yeah, or even things like if you know the office is working on something, like we are aiming to bring more transparency to the process. Where in the process did you feel like it wasn't as transparent as you needed it to be, and help you identify those soft things?
Yeah.
So that's what, and I think a form is fine, you know, for the sake of time, that's probably all you can do at this point.
Right.
I do think face-to-face conversations and the chance to like debrief is helpful, but that might be an optional thing. If
Something
somebody
to
wants
think,
to.
if we can fit it into, the staff time, okay.
I don't know
That
if this is productive, but we do a lot of stuff like that, like analysis. I'm getting really meta about like, is our processes working? Particularly regarding like, post-emergency incident, stuff like that. And, maybe this isn't what you need, but something that we do, we always try to keep like unique identifiable information out of those reports. So like a specific project or applicant names and addresses, just to help us try to keep the lens of our analysis objective.
Right.
You know, I don't know if that's something that we need to do, but it helps us where we can just say like, okay, this is how long a response time should have taken, and it didn't take that long, just like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't, this might be further than is attainable right now, and it's certainly not this body's place to assert this, but as a citizen, I would love to know what planning and zoning's goals are for how long a process should take.
Yeah.
And that way, when you're reviewing that type of information, it's not just that like giant collection of information you have to do something with, it's where did it take longer than we expected? Why did it take longer? Or where was it faster than we expected? And why was it faster this time?
Right.
And you can use those learnings to say, wow, you know, projects where people do this step first, even though they're not required to, actually make this step go a lot faster.
Mhm.
Maybe we should be requiring it here, and then you can make the whole thing much smoother. But in the point of like objective information, I think is really critical, because that way it's not, you know, dealing with that one frustrating project or that one person who's really easy to work with, and it's more like
And-
what makes everybody have an easier better experience.
Also in a systems interest and not a personnel interest. I think particularly for this body, we want to be concerned about systems and not the way you run your shop. You know?
Right. Yes, absolutely. That's what I think it comes down to is, and I do get to that on another side, like what the actual barriers are. Not, a lot of times it's not like an administrative process. It's more of a county requirement that gets things bogged down. Okay,
Do you
so,
think you're able to like guide people pretty well through the process?
yeah, I
Yeah,
do feel like we do that, a very good job at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like they don't walk out of there being like, oh my God, I didn't know what to do, like.
No, I mean, it's, we hold their hand as much as we can without like doing the work for them.
Sure.
Yeah, for
Sure.
sure. I think Jenna bends over backwards.
Yeah,
I would say though, like you mentioned, we took the time to do those tip sheets, but again, folks look at that and they're overwhelmed. So I often find myself saying, you know, don't read all this at one time.
Yeah.
Number one, just do number one, then number
Yeah.
two, just do number two, because you see all that writing and it's
Yeah.
a lot.
almost seems like there needs like a support group.
Right.
Oh my God, what did you guys?
Like, there'll be
I
days where
can-
we're like, no, we feel like we're the therapy for the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's actually like, people raise that of, you know, are there folks who have done projects who would be willing to be on a call sheet for
Yeah,
people who are first time
kinda-
developers?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, because we have a great list of like, oh my gosh, you have a question for an engineer, here's who you can call, but not, oh my gosh, you don't even know what you should be asking an engineer. Go talk to these people before you get on like time build with an engineer so that you're asking the right
Yeah.
questions. I'll bet there are folks locally who would be happy to be available if you asked.
I wonder if even that could be something the housing task force could kind of provide a forum for that, like maybe like every other meeting could be like a developer could, because we do have a couple developers on that come regularly for that
meeting.
Almost like a real estate agent thing too, because those people might be the ones selling that stuff and be like, oh, yeah, I just see you guys' time like super valuable and it's like, oh, you guys, you know, I'm just trying to,
Yeah, brainstorming is always good.
but anyways,
Yeah.
respond to survey and get $10 off your next development.
That'll pay for 10 minutes.
So, as far as, because we had a lot of people talk at the workshop in regards to the cost of development, and it's everything from the application fees to the impact fees, and then all the way up to the big costs, which are the development costs. The application fees and the impact fees, those are predictable. We can put those, I mean, they're on our web page, but we can also include those in the development guides for each application, so they're just kind of right front and center for each application. You don't have to go look through the whole document of our fee schedule. So that's happening. And then with the impact fees, they are from different, you know, GWISA has their own separate impact fees. Those are expensive. The building department has theirs at that stage. So we could try to provide within those development guides some either link to those or put them right on the development guide if it's possible that they're not. We just don't want it to be something that gets outdated and then we've quoted the impact fee the wrong amount or something, but we'll figure that out to make it more accessible so that people can see those impact fees up front, at least have a list of them, if not the actual amounts, so that they can go look at those and know what to expect. But as far as the development costs, I think with a lot of those, it's not something that we feel comfortable putting out estimates for. I think that would be a lot of extra staff time, and we might not be able to update that information, keep up with the changes in the costs. And I think that is something that the developers or landowners are gonna have to just, you know, use the resources that we put up on our website for the contractors that we do have on there, the whole comprehensive list of contractors that they can contact and find out, you know, get some bids, or even just, I'm sure that there's a way to talk to contractors that's not gonna start, you know, racking up a huge bill for them, but just to get some preliminary ideas of what things cost. We could, upon request, we could provide examples of opinions of probable costs that come from past projects and just make sure that those, the information on the OPC is, you know, anonymous. So those are a couple of thoughts there with the development costs. And as far as our biggest one for landowners, small landowners, who are looking to just do like a minor subdivision, the road improvements are the biggest barrier that we've heard, that we've come across with people. It often even is time, it completely kills a project. So people can't go forward with their minor subdivision because of the cost to widen a road, and it's required in our land use code. It starts with section 7.3 and then it moves over to the construction standards, and with these minimum design standards, each one here is listed for my major collector, minor collector, type 1, type 2. All of those are classifications for our roads, and those correspond to the transportation plan. So these are all, you know, from the 2011 or 2008, and then our recent UTMP. You know, this is based on transportation studies to kind of project out what the future traffic is going to be on these roads. So if there's, so I'm thinking anecdotally about a project I've heard about several times, where one lot somebody owned, they were trying to subdivide it into 3 lots, 2 would be deed restricted, and they, at second or third hand knowledge, were quoted a bill of several tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to pave the road that was already gravel road connecting what would be these 3 lots, and it caused the project to fail.
Yeah.
Is that, is that an accurate example of something that might happen if it's not a minor or major road? Like, it's not like this person was right off of Spanish Valley Drive, you know, this
Right.
road. Is that,
Even those rural roads out,
yeah,
like where they're dirt at this time. If there's parcels that are undeveloped, you know, out towards the end of the road that could potentially subdivide into a certain amount of homes eventually, then they have to take that into consideration as far as classifying it and planning for the future of the traffic that could be created. I mean, so that's how it's been explained to me that way from the road supervisor. And it is, but here's the thing, the construction standards and the road supervisor's kind of feedback on those is that they were updated, last time was 2010. And that there really should be an update to those and kind of a reassessment of how realistic is that growth projection for those areas? And are we actually requiring what needs to be required, or are we requiring more than what needs to be required? So.
I mean, I can think of at least 4 homes across 2 projects I know didn't get built because of something like that.
Yeah.
And I think about, that's 4 families not in a home.
So how do we move forward with that?
But it is, of course, such a complex issue, so you don't develop it, so the person who puts in the subdivision has to put in the road all the way back up. And we don't want the taxpayers to have to pay for it
Right.
in theory, so it's
It's
a
complicated.
terribly tough issue, and I would feel terrible for the person that can't afford it. And it's going right in front of their house, and maybe they gotta put sidewalks in too, but then who puts the sidewalks in when they're really required, when the development goes not just in front of their house, but somebody out here has to pay for the whole thing. It's a mess.
I mean, if there were a step forward, what I would recommend is however the new in-house engineer plans to look at this, or the road supervisor, do we have to do a full overhaul of this project to get to that particular use case? Or could we start with minor subdivisions, minor roads? Because that's where the cost is the highest.
Right.
And that's where like individual families, most likely who are already here, are most affected. And then move on to something broader and say, all right, for the person putting, 30 homes and however many acres, the economics are different and the scale is different.
Right.
Because, yeah, like, so can we scope this down?
Yeah.
And even,
I-
yeah.
I would like to also, if we gotta think about it critically, and specifically within the classification of minor subdivision, minor road. Where I'm aware of a lot of those places are not far from future proposed like non-motorized transport infrastructure, bike paths, things like that. So 3 new subdivided lots doesn't necessarily mean 6 more vehicle paths per day on a road.
Yeah.
It's something that we're talking about a lot in just travel management planning in landscapes in general, is that the presumed impact of a person, a user day in a place with the current standards is significantly less in the real world than it was when a lot of this travel science was done in the late 70s.
Yeah.
We make an individual person makes a much smaller impact. We've got more people riding their bikes. We've got cars that are both lighter and smaller, especially for commuters. So it's like, I would like to know a lot about that specifically for small units. Is like, do we need to have that requirement?
Well, and I would say, in my mind, there's a difference between there is a road, there is a lot, and off this road, we want to, subdivide this lot into 3 units or 2 units and find there's some frontage. And, that to me is a different situation than I own a property. There is a road that only serves my property. I want to extend it to serve 2 subdivided lots. Is there a PUD classification where maintain the gravel use of that road for those 3 lots? You don't have additional usage coming behind it because of the nature of the PUD. Is there a way to be smarter about where we do need to have those types of mitigations versus where we don't? And especially in the other side of it, I guess I don't understand, is in our climate, adding more asphalt or concrete to the built environment where gravel might make more sense for things like water, retention, portions. I don't know. I'm not a water engineer, but I
But
just wonder. if
road
there are
maintenance
places
is
for that.
substantially cheaper on asphalt.
And
Road maintenance, sure, but that's what I'm saying. If it's like one spoke road that's existing as gravel to serve 2 additional houses.
In that case, I don't actually think we would require.
I was gonna say,
It could be a
PUD.
parking process.
Yeah. We should confirm that because it might just be information.
yeah, that was
People
gonna
not
be
this
my point. I mean, if it was a PUD, they might be able to get away with it, right?
Yeah, well, we should confirm that and make sure. people
Yeah, I mean,
know.
that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, if it's a private maintained road.
I mean, we're not gonna solve this here tonight, but
Right,
it
we're
does seem
not.
like there's a lot of creative.
There's a
thinking
lot
that
to
could
talk
happen
about.
with it.
And
This what hangs up a lot of housing in the whole state, like. Like stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, this is a policy, that this county has in place and has had in place for decades.
Mhm.
And it's also what a lot of other areas do, but I'm curious what other communities might be doing to help offset these costs. So we want to look into that. I'm gonna add this topic to our 2023 priorities roadmap and have that on there for review by the commission, and so we can just make sure that they have our blessing to go forward and spend staff time on researching some of this, and then, of course, when the county engineer gets hired, we can, have them work with the road supervisor, and I'm sure that an eventual update to the construction standards will happen. But in the meantime, because that's a long process. In the meantime, we could find that there's other creative ways to help offset these costs. One of the things we found out with one of the projects that got completely stopped because of this was that the landowner was under the impression that maybe they would be able to subdivide and then sell that lot and then be able to pay for the public improvements after generating some funds. But you can't sell the lot until the public improvements are done. And so it's like the chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah, that's,
And anyway, so there could be some things we could just simply change that have something to do with, spreading the costs out over time or making it possible for people to sell lots before the road improvements are done. I don't know.
And Elisa, there must be differences in communities, how much of the burden's actually put on taxpayers.
Right.
I mean, if we do something like the sewer system and we put money into it and everybody gets their rates raised a bit, and then slowly it gets used by new development. So there must be places where more of it's shared by
The impact,
taxpayers
I think
who are
there
already
actually
here.
could have.
Yeah.
Very
I
interesting.
don't know if we have an impact fee for roads. Oh, no, Bill did say there is an impact fee that we charge, but it's not very much. That doesn't amount to a whole lot. So maybe that is something that could be looked at as well.
That would be popular.
Yeah, right. I know. It's like-
That one all, Obi.
I'm not on that commission. Just don't worry about it.
We kind of touched on this a little bit, but tracking the delays in project review and approval process. We could definitely brainstorm some ways to do this. I don't want it to be, it's probably not going to be a super high priorities with our staff time right now and limited staff. But I mean, what we already know is a major cause for delay. What we've been perceived from our perspective, it literally is these bigger delays that are related to development costs and, bonding for the public improvements. Or we have a project that's been going on for months because the developer keeps changing the design of the project after we've already gone through and gotten the approvals from the engineer. And so it's kind of a lot of, I don't see that there's really a ton of holdup in our administration process. It's more either these big barriers for costs or, just little changes to the project after we've already kind of have gone through all of the approvals. There's also a little bit of a holdup sometimes when the recorder's office requests a change to the final plat after the Mylar has already been printed. And we've had this happen at least once, and it's a bummer. We're trying to work on the communication there, but it's been tough.
well, that's
If I could.
the developer asking for a change then.
So I think.
Well, no, it's actually the recorder noticing something after, because we do send we send everything to the recorder.
But sometimes we just don't hear back until after it's already gone through the whole process and everything's gotten signed. And I just don't know. We've been working on it, but what were you gonna say, sorry?
I also have heard that and experienced that there's often a delay between preliminary and final plat. And I don't know, because I haven't been here enough years. I'm guessing a lot of that is in response to the COVID time and people not being available, not many local engineers, but folks are having a hard time once they get preliminary approval for their preliminary plat, then submitting for the final plat. It's often almost the full 12 months that you're allotted before someone will submit for the final plat. And then their retrospective look on their application is that that application has taken several years, when actually that delay is like the availability of contractors and such. So there's a big delay there, and I'm hoping over time that's just gonna go away with COVID kind of recovering and people being available. I don't know locally how often engineers are available, or, yeah, it's just maybe not everybody.
So, I've also heard, that because there's not, engineers is a great example, there's one, so when he's not available, and you have to go out of town, those engineers aren't as familiar with our land use patterns, like they can look at what's on the ground and they can look what's on the map, but knowing the nuances of an area, allows you to do something faster, limit errors. Yeah, the limited engineers and contractors here, it's definitely a bottleneck. As far as our land use code updates, I tried to group these into one slide. So we heard that we need to be looking at reducing ambiguity and improve interpretation around things like ridgeline standards, and community benefit. So we added those to the list. There's a lot of land use code changes that are on that list. So hopefully, we'll just keep chipping away at it. But the ridgeline standards are definitely one of those that we've had come up over and over that need clarification. Is that on the proposed roadmap? Specifically, the specification, not like revisiting it overall necessarily, but that specific standard, we could add it in there. I know that there's going to be the need to, for the land use code updates for Article 3 haven't completely been finalized. And so we could add them in just tack them on to that update. If we hope to see an increase in multifamily housing in areas like near to the highway, for example, not having clarification of when those standards apply to what extent, because they're fairly vague right now. Yeah. I fear that it will work against any incentives or any improvements we make to the underlying code itself because of that uncertainty. Right. Yeah, nobody wants their views to be blocked. Nobody wants their views to be blocked, even before you get to that point, like the concerns about whether or not someone would make it through the legislative process because of perception of ridgeline blockage. And it's not clear. More clarity for both, any perspective on that issue, I think more clarity would be very helpful to protect the folks who own property and folks who want to build that. Definitely. Okay, yeah, I can bring that up onto the priority list for sure. Do you feel comfortable with that going on the proposed roadmap? Is there any reason not to? Okay. I know Commissioner Walker has brought it up recently with us too, so he would be on board. So establishing language in the land use code related to specific justifications when we make legislative decisions. I just wanted to note here that those are definitely, I think they're pretty clear in the recent overlay zones. Like HGHO has their own, it has its own section on items of consideration, and so does the ADO, I think, is pretty clear, but the one that probably is lacking is in the overnight accommodations overlay. That's where we have that community benefit stipulation. So those will be noted for sure in the list of updates. Otherwise, the rezone decisions that we did go over those at the last meeting, the issues for consideration. Improvements could definitely be made in there. And then clarifying in land use code or tip sheets, which requirements are based on state statute and which requirements are county.
this will take significant staff time, I think, to look all of those up and kind of try to make notes of those in our tip sheets or in the land use code. And I think that could be a future project for either a student or a Vista possibly. But in the meantime, if an individual does have some, burning issue with the requirement that they want to find out, whether it's a state requirement or a county requirement, it doesn't take that much time, or it might take that time, but it doesn't take that much effort to look online and look up the state statute or in the county and compare those. And then if it's something that seems it needs to be changed, if it's a county requirement, you can submit a text amendment request and we can look at that. It's a legislative process. It requires 2 public hearings. So it's out there for people, and we can make that more clear maybe on the website too. So, but it's noted for a future project. So other suggestions that were of note: establishing dedicated deputies or co-signers for every step in the application review process. I just wanted to kind of I was trying to think how this would actually implement it realistically, and I just don't know how far we can go with this because, with the, as far as our department, I can sign, Jenna can sign, and so can the planner one eventually. So we'll have 3 people that can sign off on stuff. But most other departments are pretty lean. The road supervisor is just Bill Jackson in terms of being able to sign off. I've asked him before if he would ever have somebody under him that could sign on applications or will serve, and he said no. So, and then the recorder's office, they do have staff that can help with like minor applications, like a CUP, they could record, but plats must be reviewed by the recorder. So he has to be there in order to do that. And I think he does have like a required 24-hour period that he can hold on to the plat before he can prove it and say it's ready to record. And then the other entities that we work with are, they're not county operated. They're special service districts, they're state agencies, utility companies. And so planning and zoning doesn't have any control over kind of affecting how they go about their deputies and co-signing. So, yeah, that was just kind of where I wanted to update on status of that. Reducing the number of CUPs required for commercial use, that's definitely on the list for looking at when we get to deeper into the future land use planning and looking at that use table in Article 3. Amend the PC bylaws to require annual review of the general plan. That's definitely easy. We can do that. CUP with no use. It's conditional use permit. So people. Yeah, sorry. PC bylaws, any reason not to ask that be on our next agenda? We can discuss timing and figure out whether it should be beginning of the year. The benefit of the end of the year is we can inform staff priorities going into the next year. We don't find ourselves waiting until March to get those priorities in front of the commission. This is in the land use code, which specifies the duties of the planning commission. So this would be just literally taking the step of taking what's already codified and making sure it's in our bylaws, which we review every year, and ensure that we have that front and center for future planning commissions. Any objections to that? You comfortable with that? Yeah. Okay. Sure. And then what I read, and I think that this is a combination of what I read out of the notes from the workshop and then also kind of our input, the barriers that are out of our control. Of course, there's state statute requirements. Those are going to be changing with this legislative session. We're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with that and how our land use process is going to have to change according to that. Shortage of contractors, we talked about that. The materials costs and labor costs going up. Inflated real estate market is a huge thing. I think it's a real barrier. And I don't know how much we can't control that. So, we can do things like deed restrictions and that kind of thing, but it's only so much. Construction loans, I heard from private developers recently in the workshops, and then also just in talking to us when they're going through their process, that it's very hard to get construction loans these days, and the interest rates are high. Delays in developers securing their bonding. We see that a lot. That's one of the things we're waiting on with several of our applications. When a developer changes the design, again, that's something out of our control. And then, you know, we have our DRT partners, and they generally are pretty good at getting back to us, but it's just like I said before, it's a lot of people to round up comments for, and the response time is variable. So
Since you're the face of the county for many of these folks, and therefore get the, I don't want to use the word blame, but like you're held accountable for delays. I wonder if there's a way to work with your partners like county attorney's office, county engineer. Just, but I mean, I don't know, as we're automating these signatures, this could take care of it, but like, could we see how long it takes these steps and go to those departments and say, hey, you know, we're seeing most of the delays coming from your department. What could we do to make this easier? Right? And make sure the county commission has visibility into that, because the county commission is blind to, if there's some systemic, going back to like making the system work better, if there is some systemic delay that could be resolved through change in budget, change in roles and responsibilities, you know, right, empowerment or anything like that. It'd be great to have that out in the open, and also make it so people aren't just frustrated, oh, the county slows down the building process, and not, oh, the county's working to make this better. It's not going to make everyone happy at the same time, right? But it can move us forward towards improved experiences for the residents that we're serving.
yeah,
Something we'll be thinking about.
I wanted to ask, not exactly on that, so forgive me if we should just be moving on, but you said that a lot of developers are delaying securing their bonds, and that one confuses me a little bit, because that should not be particularly expensive.
I know.
And I'm not like a financial genius, but there are plenty of surety bond providers in this community, right? So I'm wondering where you think that's coming from. Is it a lack of education about what that means in the developer cohort, or like what?
maybe, I don't know, with this one particular example, they're not able to get their surety bond because they're waiting for, in order to get that apparently approved, they have to get their construction loan approved. And
Yeah.
the construction loan, the lender wants to see the approval of the site plan for the project, and the site plan,
Yeah.
it's like this whole
Yeah.
chicken and the egg thing. So when we can't start reviewing the site plan until the final plat is recorded.
Right.
But the final plat can't get recorded until we have the bond.
Yeah, no, that is,
It's like crazy. And normally though, people can bond without having to get their construction loan approved.
right,
I don't
that is
know.
uncommon.
Yeah, it is uncommon, so I don't know why it's a bigger project, maybe. There, I don't know the ins and outs of that, really.
Curious.
Yeah, so. it
Anyway,
happens.
sorry, that was
Weird
just,
things happen.
that one surprised me to hear.
I do
And-
feel like, I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interject,
go ahead.
but to your point, I do feel like some of it is smaller developers' lack of education. Because even Elisa and I were talking the other day that we would love someone to sit down with us and kind of walk us through what that process looks like. I had one individual who was looking to get her surety bond and thought that she'd put up all the money for it.
Right.
And it just kind of took a phone call and talking with her loan provider that, you know, that's not really the case. And I would like to know more details about that, so I can communicate it to the applicants, because I don't know them, so.
Yeah.
We could probably, I would love to do that and then put together an informational sheet for people to have.
An FAQ, like as basic as that is, it helps so much. People don't even know what questions to answer, like what questions should I be asking? I'm not even asking right now. I mean, the more accessible the process can be, the less likely it gets stalled at the end, and the less likely people get punished, right? Yeah.
Requiring bonding happens for practically every land use type of thing that
Mhm.
exists. Easements, rights of way, roads, everything,
Right,
you know,
yeah,
it should be the least confusing part.
right, and yeah, for us, it's kind of it's been a little bit of a black box, and we're learning more as we go, but. Yeah,
Anyway,
anyway, yeah,
Thoughts?
we can keep building on that. I just put this up here to kind of amuse everybody. But we're just, when it comes down to it, planning and zoning current staff, we're two planners really. We have our amazing AmeriCorps Vista Noel, who's keeping everything together with the housing master plan moving forward in our social media accounts and minute taking and so many other things. But Jenna is over there in her space, dealing with the public and trying to get these development applications processed in a timely manner. And she's just, crushing it. And I'm there to support, but I also have tons of other responsibilities. So we are just extremely maxed out all the time. Josh, our code enforcement officer, he's obviously always very busy with all of his cases. And we all work together on his cases as well.
And he's so helpful to jump in and answer questions where he's heard us answer stuff too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
He's
so
been
nice to
playing a
hear
little
him in
bit
the
of a
other
minor
room, like
role.
answering questions that he's heard before. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
That was a 20-minute call I don't have to have.
Yeah, so our new staff person is coming in mid-March. She found housing, so we're super excited. She's gonna be here and we'll get her all trained up and we'll be fully staffed. By the end of March, we'll be kind of up and running in a different way. So looking forward to that. I did want to also just provide this. This is going to be in a larger presentation on kind of looking back on in a department report for the commission as well on March 21st. I was going to provide the looking back at 2022 report and then looking forward to 2023 at the same meeting. And so just to kind of see, since this is a 2-year review, since January 2021, we processed 52 development applications, and that's commercial and residential combined. And then out of those, 10 subdivisions, 11 minor subdivisions, and 1 site plan for multifamily. And all of that amounts to 216 new residential units created in the county. And then for the building permits, there's been 163 for new residential construction. 89 of those are open, 79 are closed, and 2 are abandoned. And out of those, 13 manufactured homes, 2 modulars and moved on structure, 14 ADUs, which I thought was kind of cool to see that number, because that sometimes we think that they're not happening, but they are. 136 single family stick built. So things are happening. Sometimes it's nice to have a little reminder that there's movement, that things are going on the ground. But obviously it's just not fast enough.
I have a funny question, because then I did click on up at us at build out again.
Mhm.
So and you get a statement like today that says, well, there's no land to build on because we're all hemmed in by the feds. But of course, there apparently is a lot of land to build on. Now, one might argue, well, it's higher price land because there's not cheap land down below, but it seems like there's a lot of buildable land in the county.
There is.
So that doesn't alone account for not getting, these are for people who I think want to get developments and they don't see enough development happening quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
There is a
land.
dissonance.
Yeah. There's definitely land.
Well, this is very helpful, and I realized there was a lot of frustration in the room. Much of that frustration is related to things that is out of the county's hands or can be immediately changed, or related to policies that have been in place for some time. But it does seem like there's movement towards making things easier, providing more transparency, making the process more accessible, particularly for smaller scale developers who I know feel a lot of pain. And thank you so much for staff to continue to carry this through.
I think people at that meeting would be impressed, as I was with the document I saw, got clicked on this review. I mean, this is taking public comments seriously, addressing it, and of course, amazingly, non-defensively, as angry as some people were. So this is pretty amazing process.
Is this, Lisa, your slideshow, something that you would like on social media or a link to it, or is it not fine-tuned enough?
I think we could put it up on our website. Something that.
I might recommend highlighting the things you already know you can start doing. I mean, even
Yeah.
just in our meeting, there was a conversation
Yeah.
about roads, for example,
We
where you don't
raised this-
necessarily want to open that up on
Mhm.
Facebook, because you
Right.
get resulted at the moment.
Right.
I don't think Facebook is a great place.
Turn the comments off.
But I just feel like showing what you are doing to aid the, like, look, there is low hanging fruit here. The county heard you. The county is actually taking steps to make this better. There are things that we know need to be revisited. We can't do that today, but we plan to. Here's what we're gonna be doing. The future land use code is gonna resolve some of the conditional use permitting issues. We have an engineer now coming in with that open head count. That's gonna allow us to revisit some things like our 2010 road plan, like for all the comments we've heard over the last year, and the, election particularly, of there's no value in planning. Well, planning allows us to look back and improve what has been going on. Things like this roads process, maybe needs to be revisited for our current circumstances. I think there's a lot of really positive stuff in there. And
Yeah.
we should be
Shall we
showing.
highlight that and
Yeah.
put something up on the web that's just a kind of a condensed summary of
Yeah.
what we're gonna be working on?
Sure. I mean, that'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, I like it. I like that idea.
I'd love for the county commission to raise it as well in their meeting. I know you won't be at the next one, but sometimes people listen to the county commission meeting and they don't see what's happening behind the scenes. And this is one, it would be really great to.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. Hey, can you add in, are you Facebook?
Yeah.
Oh, you are. Would you mind pulling that water, presentation that Mark did at the last county commission and throwing it on your Facebook page? It was so great. I mean, we do have land, but we may not have water. I think he did a really good job of kind of going over those particulars. If you guys didn't catch that, it's well worth the.
Yeah.
And I think the more people that watch something like that or listen to. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. If you don't mind.
Yeah, are you envisioning the actual video putting?
Yeah,
Or
however you wanna
linking
do
to
it. Yeah, or like a link to it, or yeah, I just think the more access we
Yeah.
can get to it.
The PDF, if you,
Yeah,
they'll let you link to the PDF, but you'd have to directly upload the video. If you went to YouTube, it doesn't show it, but
Yeah.
if you show people the PDF. Really amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much for that forward. Absolutely. Any other comments?
I just, citizens to be heard.
Oh,
Was that-
goodness, no.
I just realized, oh, this is good, okay.
We'll do that as a good call out. It is, we are wrapping up this agenda item. If you are on YouTube and you are waiting to make a comment, you can join now, and when you join, we will open up citizens to be heard, but seeing nobody in the room and nobody on meeting, we will go ahead and move on. But thank you, Opie. Good call. Okay. On to future land use. All right. Go ahead and start. I'm gonna excuse myself. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen with our timeline here. I didn't have this in time to include it in the packet, but. So at our last meeting, Emily brought up, and I thought it was a really good idea to get a timeline together. To work backwards, to see kind of how we can fit all of this in and still get this approved and adopted maybe by early summer. So that's my goal. I know we have some interested developers, like the one who came to the county commission meeting last and is very motivated to get their Title IX low income tax credits application done so they can do affordable apartments, but we don't have anywhere where those would be allowed. So in order to kind of, we feel the pressure from developers. We obviously can't create our timeline based on that, but the original idea was to try to wrap this up around spring, early June. And that would at least be in May when the low income tax credit approvals are needed or whatever for that timeline. It could be that we're far enough along that, the commission and planning commission could look at a rezone request and we would know already something in how to make that decision. Anyway, so first starting out like today, we're just going to be going through this timeline
And then looking at the updated draft, I did get some more progress done on the future land use map. And so I'll bring that up and we can just kind of have a quick discussion. I don't think we're gonna get too far into it tonight. But this, for over the next couple of weeks, I would like to also have a workshop set up with our road supervisor in WISA in order to really workshop the draft future land use map that I put together and get feedback from them to understand where we've designated density, if it's going to be supported by levels of service for the roads and for water. So those are two really big question marks that I need to get their feedback and start having that discussion. They'll be involved along the way as well. But out of that meeting, I hope to get enough feedback to be able to develop 2 alternative scenario maps based on that. And so I'm envisioning like the map that we have right now that I've developed is pretty intense in terms of what it's proposing. It's a lot. So I think that this first draft of this future land use map might be the really intense scenario of changes. And then we'll have like 2 other scenarios that will be proposing density in different areas or less density overall. And of course, what I've developed right now is going to change anyway. So, but Emily, I was just saying, after I get some feedback from Bill and WISA on levels of service and if they think this is crazy, what we've proposed so far, and give us some feedback, then I can start developing 2 alternate scenarios to kind of show, I want them to be quite different. Because we've also gotten some feedback already that folks don't necessarily want to see the density in the existing neighborhoods, that there's all this land down in, the southern part of the county that's just wide open. Why wouldn't we put density there? But there's an argument to be made that that's further away from town and you don't really want your high density away from town, and so there's, I think, but those are things that we can illustrate on the maps in different scenarios, and then people can, when we get to the workshop stage, we can start building some consensus and getting people's, voting on stuff like that. So over the next couple of weeks, we'll be working on that. And then in March, or so like later in March, I will start working on editing the text in the land use chapter of the general plan, which needs some work. And that needs to align with what we're proposing in the future land use designations. And then scheduling a meeting with the future land use map steering committee, which we started back in 2022 and it kind of fizzled after we got pulled away to work on other things. So I'm going to try to get that group back together. And I think that it still should consist of some planning commissioners and some county commissioners, and then all of the roads department, building, WISA, and a few other folks that need to be on there. Who was that? Is that Opie, Steve, and Josie? But we have that?
It could be, but I'm not sure we ever met. Did we?
We met a couple times.
We met a couple times?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And it was on the future land use map. I do remember meeting.
Yeah, we didn't have a really good draft yet. We were
Yes.
kind of talking about, we didn't have a map at
Yeah.
all. I think it was because we were kind of going back and looking at what the consultants had put together for the future land
Yes.
use analysis, which was the broader picture. And this is more of the zoomed in, looking at the valley particularly. I won't be at our next planning commission meeting, but can you facilitate figuring out who's going to be on that going forward? So that, we get that adopted, hopefully we'll have mostly people here. Yeah, do you think 2 or 3?
No, well, no more than 3.
We can't have more than 3,
So I think just go off. 3 is nice because people drop off, people get this, right? So 3 means you have at least 1.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly, so
That'd be my recommendation.
that'd be great.
And are you gonna miss 1 or 2?
If a quorum is needed, I think the next one I can call in.
Okay.
But I will be about to get on a 9-hour flight, and then I will not be around for the next one.
Strap it in.
Hmm?
I should strap it.
Oh, gosh, I'm so stressed. I'm so excited and so stressed now. Who travels?
So just going down the line here, let's see, we'll meet again in March 27th. You'll still be gone, right? But we'll just kind of be reviewing the progress on the scenarios and getting ready for the public workshop, which, oh, I also want to have in April, on April 4th, I'd like to bring the future land use map scenarios to the county commission, either in a workshop with them, probably a workshop would be best. And then, so we can kind of just get their initial feedback on what is being proposed ahead of the public workshop, which would be tentatively sometime around April 12th. I was thinking, it's after Easter, maybe spring break is over by then. So we'll have to kind of work on that a little bit more, but that's a Wednesday.
And we
And
had that town hall at Star Hall last.
our
year.
last
It was
one,
about-
yeah, it was around then. And then the last workshop too, this very last one was on a Wednesday as well. So maybe there's something about Wednesdays. So after that, I would be incorporating changes from the public input and other stakeholders, continuing to draft edits in the land use chapter. And then we'd be bringing back everything to the planning commission April 24th. And that would be pretty much our last planning commission meeting before we have another workshop. And then we would have the public hearing at the May 22nd meeting. And in between that, there would be another steering committee meeting. So the planning commission members that are on that would get to have some more feedback at that time. So it might be ambitious, but I don't know. I think we can work towards this.
I understand. Thank you so much for the detail.
Yeah.
This is helpful. One thought in related business to this. I already anticipate that the notion of a future land use map is something that many people won't understand what it actually means. The more education we can start doing now.
Yeah.
What is a future land use map? Hey, you know, all those times that, you don't know what's gonna happen on the lot next to you when it sells. Well, now you will have an updated ability to have better predictions anyway about what's likely to go there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's going to, your house isn't gonna change tomorrow. I think the
Right.
more education, the better, and consistent, like the same message over and over and over again, because it's complicated and it's scary.
Yeah, we have something already on Grand County Connects, a project page that describes the process and what it means, but I'll go back and revisit that and make sure that it's really clear
Yeah,
for the public and.
I just fear that,
Yeah.
if you wait for people to go to a website, they'll never read it.
Right.
We could do like a one page, like something that we post on Facebook and do social.
Oh, to
social
the-
media.
Yeah.
Talk to KZMU, talk to the country music station, I think the more.
Yeah, maybe a little piece in the paper would be good. Yeah.
Turn off those comments.
It is so hard because it's so diffuse to people now, and then 5 years from now, they'll say, hold it, you said high density housing. There, I never was told about it. I never knew about it.
Right.
I'd have to say, I would have been guilty of that 20 years ago, quite likely in buying a house.
Yeah. Well, and in addition to that, if people are saying, why don't we just put high density down south? Those big parcels are all Sitla parcels. Or they're BLM. When you drive down the highway, it's, BLM and Sitla. And I do think there's a perception of, I've seen a farm on that property, so someone's just being greedy and not building multi-family housing. No, they leased it from Sitla. That's a Sitla property. And so I do think again, we can't solve all these problems, but this is where education can be so helpful. So people understand.
Yeah. So I'll just bring up the current draft that we have here. Share that with you. Can you share Adobe, Acrobat? Oh, here we go. Share.
Wow.
So, yeah, so this is kind of what I was saying. There's a lot being proposed in terms of
consolidating density kind of to the east of Spanish Valley Drive, or sorry, to the west of Spanish Valley Drive, but to the east of Highway 191 in kind of trying to create that buffer between highway commercial and rural residential. So this is I'll put the street names on here next, so you'll be able to orient yourself, but this is Spanish Trail Road right here. And this is where we've kind of proposed like a node, a potential future node of mixed use, neighborhood commercial. So the pink is the neighborhood mixed use, and then the orange is like, I think that's multifamily 8, multifamily 18. But the dark orange is reserved for over in here. This would be like multifamily 35 units per acre. So in thinking about where to put those higher density kind of apartment style buildings that might go up 3 stories, we probably want to avoid that in the valley here. But it's just kind of, those are my, my initial sort of making these decisions. The other areas that we could have higher density and the height could be in here. Like this is actually where Viewgate Terrace, the apartment building, is going in right now. And this is where this property has been identified by Hooper Knowlton, the developer that presented to you guys last week. So some potential for being closer into town, next to the city, where there's already like intense highway commercial all along here. And then there's some smaller lots and density in this area. Can you scroll down to the following? Yeah, the colors are really off on that screen compared to on my screen. But I'm just, you can go all the way down. So like those 2 big triangles right there are Sitla properties. Do we not want to label this here? Yeah. We've gone back and forth. We don't currently have zoning for Sitla parcels. Aren't they asked to follow they have the discretion not to, I guess?
Yeah, it's not a requirement.
But if we have it on the map, it's harder for them it's one extra step to ignore local land use.
100%, I think Sidla property ought to be zoned in the county.
I don't agree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I think we've talked about doing that in the past, and yeah, we could certainly propose some zoning on Sitla land, and I know that they don't have to follow our.
Well, again, that's debatable. They've not had that court case yet. And again, I'll bring up once again, when the city said they were going to let them double Lions back in terms of how much development would be up there. And citizens said, oh, that's a major decision, not a minor one. Court came back and said, you know what? It is a major decision. Did Sitla at that point say, well, it really doesn't matter what the city thinks. We're going to put double the development up there. They did not. They said, we're going back to the original development. I would say it's not 100% clear. They think they can do that. Maybe they can. Number 2, though, they will say things like, well, we plan to agree with the county. So, but if we don't have anything out there,
Right.
then we're really in trouble.
That's where my head is, it's the whole get caught trying. I would love to show that the county is working to try and find a way to get value out of those parcels, but also in cohesion with our surrounding our plan and the surrounding area. And I don't think it could hurt. I don't know.
I would suggest this.
Yeah.
Because I know the administrative code well enough at the state level that there is specific language in state administrative rule that says that county planning and zoning has absolutely no bearing on the design or construction or use of state-owned property. Now, hold on.
Yeah.
Just let me- I'm gonna take a
I was
minute
just gonna
to
give you
finish.
an alternative.
Let me finish. And we, and we know, I know for a fact that the property rights ombudsman in Salt Lake City feels that that is both legal and the way it's supposed to work. When we designed Utah Raptor State Park and the county commission stipulated a lot of design standards in that area and included Sitla and non-Sitla state land in that section. That didn't matter at all. So I also think I agree that the county zoning state land is a good idea. For it is in the best county interest. I would like the county commission to decide whether or not we want to choose to do that, because that is a lawsuit. And the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman, he's the guy who, when they go to court, will be called as the expert witness. It's his whole job to adjudicate that discussion, and we know where he stands.
So what's the timeline for the two alternatives being produced to the one that you currently have here?
So, I know, I'm sorry.
We would be coming to the county commission in
I'm sorry,
April
Obi.
for with the three scenarios. Could we ask the county, someone asked the county commission if there can be a discussion item at their next meeting on whether or not to direct staff to include Sitla parcels in our proposed maps, knowing there is no commitment to adopt? Or should there be a proposal that includes it or not? You know, the other side of it is if we are hearing reticence from the community to support higher density if where it's mapped, because there are these big giant parcels south of town and why aren't we using them? Then at least it would give us also more ability to say, here's an alternative with that, but that might not be viable. Here's the backup solution. If that's not viable, you know, like, let's actually put all of the options on the table. But I agree the county commission should direct, but if we could get that direction as soon as possible, that way you're not blocked. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
No problem. Yeah, so the other thing I want to make mention of as we're thinking about this is when we're increasing density in other places, I feel like it's wise to try to decrease in other areas. And so I know that's been a conversation that it's been brought up. Nobody's going to voluntarily downzone their property. But there has been discussion about implementing downzoning areas. The light green here it's designated right now in this map as 2 acre minimum. That would be downzoning these properties, but these parcels are most of them are 2 acres or more already. So a lot of them are 5 to 10 acres up in this area. So I've tried to capture the parcels that are already developed with that lot size and then redesignate them as what they actually are on the ground. I don't know, you know, the amount of public opposition to that could be great. It could maybe some of the people would actually appreciate in the neighborhood to have that kind of lower density zoning applied going forward.
Does it actually apply, or because it's a future land use map and not changing anything on the ground?
It wouldn't apply unless the county wanted to take that action and go ahead and downzone, like, for real. It would be an effect to the zoning map. Yeah.
I see I think Aaron might want to say something. Am I cutting you?
No.
Sorry, you're right. I see an opportunity here, particularly in these couple lots that you have zoned down to, that's the agricultural, right?
The dark green is actually open space, and that's why
What's the dark brown?
the
Sorry.
dark brown is range and resource,
Range
which
and
is like, this dark brown is 20 acre minimum lot size.
That's back in Steel Bender, isn't it?
Yeah, and that one hasn't been downzoned. No, okay, then I misunderstood. I
Oh,
couldn't see
no,
your cursor.
no, you're, in this map, it would, if it was implemented fully, it would be a down zone. Yeah, because we don't have anything that goes lower than 5 acre minimum lots. So range and grazing right now is what this probably is. And that's 5 acre minimum lots. So going to 20 acre minimum would be a major down zone.
Sure. I was just saying there might be an opportunity here if we're going to talk about implementing down zoning. To maybe tackle some of those issues that come up when a person wants to add, a higher density development, and they're willing to set aside a certain portion of their lot, but that portion of the lot is up against the rim wall and it's not developable anyway.
Mhm.
That scenario is kind of niche.
Right.
But it really got my goat the last time it came up to us, because it's like, you're just asking for more development on everything that's developable.
Mhm.
And so that might be a unique situation where we can, if that is theoretically possible,
Mhm.
then we may reserve the right to downzone in an instance like that.
I
Right.
think that might need to be its own question for the commission and
Oh, it will be.
priorities, but I mean, like, calling that out on the roadmap,
Yeah, for sure. It would have to be something coming from them.
but I mean, I would even go so far as maybe to add that to your roadmap presentation and say,
Yeah.
here are things we could substitute what's on here with, as if it made sense to tackle that with the.
Right.
Yeah, and so the dark green again is, I designated this as open space because this is all the land that's in conservation easement. I think it's in perpetuity. So then we have the golf course here as well, which is likely not to go away. So I don't know if this is city property. It would be interesting. In other communities, you do have, sometimes you have zones that are actually open space zones. And so we could think about implementing that as well in the new zoning map. And then in the blue, I included OSTA as a community public facility. And then the other big community public facility, of course, would be the Atlas site in the future. Yeah, What do you have up at 313?
actually nothing yet.
Okay. I mean, we do have the benefit of a recent small area plan in that area.
Right. Anyway, yeah, so there's Umtra up there, and then there's the Matheson's Wetlands Preserve, that would also be in the green. So there's still some areas that I haven't worked on, like this area in here. This all needs to be filled in. Some of this hasn't been parsed out yet. So that'll happen. It won't take me that long, and then I can start working with the roads department and WISA and figuring out what's being proposed here. I'm trying to keep in mind, obviously, like what is already called out in the transportation plan in terms of future roads and what those right of way widths are, and keeping the higher density development around those roads. So. And we also have areas where we currently have, like Arroyo is right here. And we have high density development already going in. Right around where we also have current zoning is multifamily right here. And this is also currently general business. So that in itself is kind of creating a bit of a node, because we have these government buildings here where people work, and there's even talk about Arroyo having some kind of a little commercial aspect right here. And then this is all Arroyo, which is all gonna be, higher density housing. That's already approved.
How dense is it?
It varies, it's the new apartment that Hasu is doing, it's like 100 and something. Just a little over 100 units, I think, on one of these parcels down here.
Mhm.
I believe. I would have to go look. They have a bunch of different densities, kind of varies. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know, because then it would tell us a little bit what 35
Mhm.
units per acre looks like,
Right.
can feel like in a community.
What is the
Yeah.
bowling alley apartments? The gravel.
Cinema Corps?
Yeah, sorry, my head can't.
Bowling alley.
Always says that. Oh, that'd be good to look at. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the ones that are existing in
Yeah.
the area that we could compare? Yeah, hacks for examples. I can look into that. Yeah.
What?
It's just that this is gonna be really controversial.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be tough.
Out here, this is actually already this dense. So a lot of these little areas that are kind of like, why'd you put that there? But it's actually just what's on the ground. So I just kind of highlighted it in that. It could be. I don't know. I think it's probably better to reflect what's actually on the ground than call it something else. Is there any planning device with this process to? So we have these areas of proposed high density on this draft map. We know water conservation is going to be such a critical part of developing density and additional housing in the valley. We know that, you know, there's concerns with deed restrictions, and yet, you know, maybe for apartment buildings, you're less likely to find a number of second homeowners, but condos certainly can attract second homeowners. You know, what devices are available to look at this at the same time to say, you know, hey, we think this can support up to this density, but we also know that if these other conditions are not met, we want to do here without also undermining the goal of having housing for our workforce. Like those two trade-offs are such a razor's edge for me.
Right.
But I want to make sure that where we are building smart. I mean, multi-use, you know, dense family housing can be incredibly water smart in that it consolidates use on a smaller area of land. How do we make that easier for folks? I'm just, like, obviously you've got your hands full and we can't look at all of that together, but I really hope that's a fast follow. Like, I would love to spend the second half of the year looking at that problem. Okay, we've got this future vision. How do we make sure that we build in a way that doesn't lead us down the road of unsustainable water commitments? You know, or building a bunch of units that go to a bunch of people to build second homes, third homes that they come in and live in 3 months a year.
Yeah.
Like, that is my biggest fear with this.
I agree.
Well, so you're kind of touching on two things, which one of those things is when we discussed before that the idea about the higher density zoning districts or the land use designations, they would be applied for, and potentially that would be a time where a development agreement would be triggered, and then deed restrictions could be implemented for those, for a certain percentage of that development or that parcel of land.
But Elisa, doesn't you help me here? Don't you need an overlay process for that? Because otherwise you're giving something, they're giving something for zoning, but if you have as I understand, if you have an overlay process, then they can both be done at the same time. Doesn't it need a special process?
I think, well, we should look into it, but I want to say that if we include it in our land use code as a requirement for that zoning district, that it could be just.
Oh, yeah,
It's just
so
in
if
there.
you wanted to do 35, then it would have a requirement that, I
It
bet
would be
you
a
could.
use standard
Absolutely.
more than but the
Yeah.
development agreement could be something that, a tool to utilize as well. I don't know, you're right, it could be that is only applied when you're using an overlay or applying for an overlay. Should we plan to preemptively update these use descriptions to include text saying upzones require the development agreement, that we can go back and retroactively remove once we, you know, build out the rest of the land use code? My fear is somebody goes, this is great, buys 5 parcels and that, you know, planning to build 15 units per acre. Right. And wants to build a bunch of condos, and then, you know, 2 months later, we come back and say, here's how we're gonna do this to be water smart, and they go, you can't do that. I've already, you know, like, I realize there's controls, but I always think about worst case scenario to protect the community and protect our best interests. Right. You know, yeah, that's definitely one of the policy issues that we need to work on, is how we want to deal with the upzoning and ensuring that when somebody gets approved for a higher density zone, that some of that will go back to creating either just local workforce housing, or even beyond that, we talked about using that as an opportunity to implement some kind of affordable housing requirement. I don't know how far we want to go with that and how realistic it is with, for the penciling out of projects, and we have to work with the community a little bit on that probably.
It would be great. So you had the developer come and speak at the county commission. If there was somebody like that or a couple folks who'd be open to sort of consulting to us with the goal of how can we make this map pencil out for projects that serve the community? Like,
Right.
what does that look like? Not the small scale developers, but like for large scale developers, who might build apartment unit of 50 units or more. Like, what needs to be in place for you to say this is worth doing?
Mhm.
In a way that we can work with you to also protect the community's interests.
Right,
Like,
right,
I just,
yeah.
I'm blind to that, and I want to make sure we're doing this right and doing this right by the folks who would actually be building, but also not waiting until somebody submits an application and gets mad at us that we're not doing it right. You know,
And actually, BAE Urban Economics, in their scope of work, they have a portion of that still is, we haven't completed the whole work with them, so I just got in contact with him again, and we're gonna start picking up the next phase of the whole housing study, which did include looking at how we can realistically make some of these changes in our future land use designations and stuff. So they'll be helping out, and they're economists, so I think that'll be helpful for sure. The other thing I just wanted, before we wrap up, is that when we talk about water and build out capacity, I think that we're gonna want to, and I've planned that we would use the build out study that I created back for the housing nexus study, and use these numbers and this formula and and maybe fine tune it. Maybe it needs to be modified somewhat, but the idea with the scenarios and the future land use map in relation to the build out study would be to try to not increase our build out by increasing density in certain areas. So that's why you would also have to decrease density in other areas. So we can use the formula from the build out study that I created in GIS, and we can project out each scenario and how it would affect the residential build out and even commercial build out if we wanted to look at that too. But that would be the idea. All right, so like right now, with our current zoning, and after we take out, 30% reduction for constrained lands and infrastructure and drainages, and then we reduce the capacity back down again 25%, which for water capacity, that might need to be a lot more. The residential build out with our current zoning and the existing units that already are on the ground would be 8,688 units. Current is 2,323.
Some of the population of Moab's are in that already.
What's that?
Isn't the population of Moab, I mean, what there's families. and
Yeah,
stuff
these
like
are houses, these are units,
Yeah,
not population, so
that.
yeah,
You're right. You're right.
households,
Also,
I guess, is how you would look at this. But yeah, I mean, this is just it looks crazy to see these numbers, but this is literally what we have zoned right now, what's allowed to be built, it's built. As long as there is water.
Well, and Mark gave us, I mean, we have the amount of water that we have, but the reality is, and he made that really clear in that presentation, we can do whatever we want. And I will tell you, San Juan County is doing that.
Right.
They are not gonna stop at 500 acre feet, at least not what I see right now,
How are
what's
they gonna
going
get
through
a
their
will
plan. Huh?
How are they gonna get a will served?
They don't, like Mark said, you can just keep going. He goes, it is up to us, the planning commission and the county commission, to stop at some point. They do not control the state. The state does not stop they're not gonna stop us. We can do, Cedar City over allotted, right? They went over their capacity. The state does not step in and say, we're in charge of that and the commission's in charge of that.
I don't know how much longer that opportunity will be available to us.
I got you. Good.
There are
I like
there are very intelligent people
Good.
asking questions like, well, what actually is the connection between groundwater and surface water levels in the Colorado River? These questions are coming up and there's money getting, they're starting to ask. So I would say that, this is not like, that is the way it works right now. The state legislature's attention has been on the Great Salt Lake. Given the snowpack this winter, I imagine that the next legislative session is going to focus on the Colorado River. Because the Great Salt Lake's gonna fill back up. So let's wait and see.
I do know there was that proposed legislation, which may still make it out this week, about what was discussed at that attainable housing group under the workforce services. They were toying with the idea of almost going so far as to apply a future land use map administratively, which is the other thing I'm not worried that will be incapable of developing a future land use map that makes sense given the interests of the county. I am worried that without the controls of ensuring density is offset by water conservation, particularly, we're gonna lose the narrative. And I think that, I don't want to delay this process, but I would rather make this process cover both.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Because if we don't do them together,
I agree with
once
you.
that fault slips, I get really,
I
really
agree
nervous.
with you. Yeah.
So maybe that's something the commission needs to direct
Yeah.
prioritization as well.
For sure.
And to back up, Trish, I think that's basically what Mark and Cash would say. They don't want to step in
That's right.
and tell us, you've got to stop developing.
That's right.
You've got to come forward with a plan and convince us that water's really running out, or you're gonna start mining the aquifer, and that you can't save enough water to still develop.
Right.
And even if you give us, you're gonna go down another 20% because of climate change, because that's what we've done the last 20 years in terms of our water resources, it looks like. So I do think he put the burden on us, in part because apparently they did this somewhere. I can't remember where they did it, and they got in a lot of trouble. That is, they stepped in. And they don't want to be the ones to do this process, because there's a lot of political heat if you're going to stop development or slow it.
Sure.
Some western towns are just saying, okay, no more groundwater. We're doing like building infrastructure for other water sources, stormwater especially. And, that's my whole thing. Like, why don't, instead of conservation and all that, should we start planning for a supply side boost?
There is an effort with that already, with the city, because county is not a water provider, so.
Right.
But we are involved in.
Well, I'm asking more like the commission should be like, I don't know. Yeah.
City and GWISA and, yeah.
And San Juan County.
San Juan
and
County
their
are
special service
coordinating
district.
on-
Yeah.
And they have a consultant working on their water utility resource management plan, so they're to develop future sources of water. Yeah, it's on the city's website if you go to,
Okay.
we're gonna link to it on ours too, but.
What I don't understand is if San Juan County has X amount of water and they're building past X amount of water, and GWISA is the authority to make sure that water is apportioned,
They're not, they have their
No.
own special service
Now they have
district.
They have a special
so
service
they're just gonna
district.
keep pulling it out of the ground.
The little bit of discussions I've had from some of their planning commission is, they said, as long as we're not depleting the aquifer, what I understand is we can keep building. And I said, how do you know you're not depleting the aquifer? And they didn't really know how to respond to that question.
There's an aquifer between Mississippi that started flowing the wrong way when it started.
I should
getting
ask
rain.
which aquifer.
Um,
Seemed to, anyways,
Valley Phil.
so.
Yeah, seriously.
So, I mean, right now, you know, that they've got a lot flowing through their planning, a lot. And large developments, not a little. And I think it is something that we need to be monitoring and there is this joint effort, which is great. I think Kevin is actually the liaison for that, so that's great. But there's a lot going on down there,
And 500 acre feet is enough for 1,000 units.
right? So
So
one of
that's
the
a-
developments alone, there's
that's
a
a-
development alone is 1,200 units.
Mhm.
That was just moved through the planning commission.
Okay.
So it's just something to.
We have a lot we need to ask the
Obviously.
commission for, sorry.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot we need to ask the commission for direction on, because, so zoning silo parcels, whether to bundle this with conservation requirements for up zoning, even in line with future land use map. The possibility of putting some sort of control in the definition of these land use definitions in the short term, if nothing else, to ensure upzones cannot happen administratively per our code, that it requires some sort of something. Anything I'm missing that has come up? that we
I'd only
direction?
phrase it different. And I mean, I guess upzonings. I see what you're saying, that we would do the upzoning without somebody coming to us. It's not an administrative
Oh, no.
decision ever.
No, sorry, let me reframe that.
Yeah.
So the conversation was, should something happen at the state level where there was a decision made that a future land use map applied administratively?
Got it.
What controls could we put in place in the short term until we had the time to develop the right policy that ensured upzoning was matched with conservation effort, with the goal of increasing housing without reducing our ability to support our residents through through water availability. And we believe that there may be opportunities like supply side boosting, like conservation. I know there's some really innovative land use engineers in town who are thinking about this, but it's just in the short term, while adopting future land use maps, if we don't pair it with this directly, should we have some kind of definition that said this zone cannot be applied in Grand County without a blank, and that blank could be something as simple as the conservation agreement with the county to ensure water availability or something like that. This is me I'm way outside of my ability to speak accurately in terms of this, but you get what I'm getting at. And I think we just need the commission to tell us how far we should go with this without considering conservation, or what we need to pair with what, because that's the purpose of long range planning. Do you feel comfortable with that?
It's definitely, well, it's supposed to be comprehensive, so I think it is smart to involve all of those topics when you're creating something like this, so.
Yeah, and I think our current commission's extremely concerned about water. And it's been great. We keep having Mark come, and Arnie came last time, and just trying to be as educated as possible.
All right, well, we had a future discussion of the roadmap, but we've kind of been talking about that, so.
Yeah, I don't really need to
No,
cover that
so-
again, yeah.
All right, well, at our next meeting, if you need me, I'll be phoning in from Phoenix, otherwise I'll see you all in a month and change.
Have fun.
Have fun.
Thank you. Hope he's on it. We'll have our new planning commissioner, very exciting.
Wow, that is exciting.
Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Second.